review and adoption. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Second, of note, 3 council members are present, 2 are virtual. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
And then, we'll look for a motion to suspend the rules of order.
Make a motion to suspend the rules of order.
So second,
I'll second.
motion and a second, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right,
Go ahead, Stacy, floor is yours.
Very good. Thanks. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you either on your own little screen or in the room. Glad to be here. And Ryan, I'm assuming there aren't any other, or for that matter, Anna, any other announcements that need to be made. Is that a fair assumption?
Correct. I think we've handled all the meeting requirements to keep going. Yep.
Okay, very good. So then if you look at the agenda, wherever that's showing up for you, and I know you've approved it, but just wanting to make sure that we're all grounded in what's going to happen here. Really, it's getting into those binders in a big way. And I know you've been waiting for this, so that's terrific. Before we get into the binders, though, we do need to do a little bit of last adjustments to some of those policies. You'll remember at our last work session, there were a couple things that needed to be resolved, and that was going to require a bit of staff time to sort through. So that's really what's going on in A, B, and C. In D, I want to just call the bigger question about activating in October. We're in good shape. I want to lift up a couple reminders to you at the risk of going down a rabbit hole, which I don't want to do because we really do want to get to those binders. So we're going to try to get all of that policy adjustment stuff done in the first half an hour. And then I'll largely be silent unless there are questions come up, and Anna's agreed to run the process a bit more in area 3 or item number 3, where you're going through those binders since she's been closest to those. And I don't remember what the red highlighting was. Can you just remind us what the significance of that is?
That is just marking forms, like items that they haven't seen before. So just to help them jump to those quickly.
Yep. Okay. So once we've gone through all of that, or you with Anna's help, then you'll focus a bit more on the procedural guide portion of the binder, about a half for that review, because we didn't get to that last. Then we'll take a break. And then depending on where we're at, we will either go ahead and pick up that article that I had sent you way back when with that scenario about the airlines. Do you remember that one? And we'll enjoy a bit of time just thinking about what we can glean from and learn from that article. Even if we don't get to it today, I'm not willing to sacrifice that. So it'll come back to us in some way, shape, or form in a future work session, because I really think that there's a lot that article can offer you in terms of mindset and kind of work approach collectively that would serve you well in the future. So that's our wild card, our meaning Anna and my wild card for this agenda. And then back into the procedural guide, that can be a slog. So we broke it up into 2 sections. And then a quick talk through the next steps. And if you were to take a peek at the next page, you'd see that that's where I've outlined some questions for discussion about that article. So no need to be thinking about that right now. They're just hanging out there waiting to be picked up. Excuse me. So that's what we're looking at for the agenda right now in a bit more detail. So if we go back up to number 2, Anna, I think I'm going to turn it over to you again to go through A, B, and C. All right.
Yeah, I'm going to attempt to. Are you guys able to see the ends on your screen?
I'm still seeing the agenda, so it might be a bit of a delay.
I still
Okay.
see the agenda only.
Okay, let me do this. And then. Okay, how about now?
Yep.
Good. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit for folks in the room. I think the only thing we left here, there were two items that we left on this one. The first was having Carrie try to define better. We had left this language right here as strategic development, I think, and just asked her to use some of her APA planning background of what would be a better term of what we were trying to get at. And so you'll notice here and in our ELs, she went with planned and purposeful growth. And so that was an adjustment. And then the only other item on here that we sent back with some requested review was to have Rob take a look at the financial items and compare it with his GFOA advisor. And they did review that. You probably saw that on my Friday update. They reviewed that and felt these were the best holistic, higher arching financial items. And then really where it would come into play is the operational strategies underneath these. So no substantial changes here, but just wanted to call both of those out. Any questions, edits? Okay, so that's wrapped up then. I'm gonna switch to what's next on our list. Oh, executive limitations. Let me share that with you guys remotely.
That was a whole new policy, which was a really cool,
Yeah, she did a nice
a really
job.
cool idea. I was appreciating it just from my vantage point.
So let's start there. I'll zoom in for you guys. This is the planned and purposeful. We made a whole new branch of ELs related to planned and purposeful development. And the avenue, you probably saw the comments when I sent this out earlier, the avenue that Carrie took was, let's make sure that this ensures present day via our city ordinances for planned and purposeful development. It ensures future through our comprehensive plan. It ensures that we have a really transparent and effective process, which has been something that she's really worked hard on, is making sure that everything's accessible online, that it's a efficient process, that everybody follows the same process. And then the other thing that she thought would be important to you guys, but wasn't entirely sure and is looking for feedback on, is the fees portion of just giving some guidance on, that seems to be the other area in development that is of importance, but also kind of tends to create heartache with developers, is our fees. And so she just plugged in there plus or minus 5% of a regional average, but also wanted to make sure you guys were aware that that may result in a fairly significant reduction of our current fees. Not entirely sure, we need to look at that, but not every city charges fees the same. Like St. Cloud is trying to work up to our fees and some of their whack and sack fees. And so she said, maybe you might want to reword that to be not plus or minus 5%, but worded something different. But I think you can try to see what she's trying to get after. There is some guidance around what our preference would be for fees and calculations, or if you don't want it all together, up to you guys. So I'll stop talking and let you edit away.
Anna, can you scroll up so we can see the whole thing again? There you go.
Fees are still something that will require council action
By the
on an
fee
annual
schedule.
basis for the fee schedule.
Yep.
So I guess I struggle with
Do you put it in here?
having 2.9.4 in there. I mean, unless we word it to would not recommend. You know, thou shalt not recommend fees
Well,
above, but
That's what it is right now, right?
approval is there. They're not approving it.
Oh,
We're approving it at a council level on an annual basis as part of all of our city fees.
recommend.
And so that's where I'm struggling with is,
Also, I feel like, fees should be calculated on, like, the work it takes staff to do some of these things versus, another city might be able to get something done in a longer or shorter amount of time with less resources or more, but for us, that could be different.
Yeah.
And so I struggle with the regional average just because
It's not.
it's not
Yeah.
representative of our costs, so to speak.
and that was, I thought on, that's something, Carrie and I had a side conversation on a while ago about fees, and I think you were part of that as well, of just, where's our fees? We've gone online, our fees aren't reflective of the efficiency of our online investment,
Mhm.
right? And so as others try to play catch up, our cost continues to go down. We should be, I think to your point, bringing our fees in line with what our cost is to serve, which continues to create an advantage that I don't think anyone else in the area has from an overall online process.
Mhm.
How do we word that?
Or like you said, manage it with the fee schedule, because that's still gonna be where you'll see it is every fall but maybe you put the football field boundaries for what comes as a recommendation for that fee schedule.
Like thou shalt not, recommend fee schedule review, like
Without
against
operational,
operational costs and time spent, I don't know, something that reflects the work that's being done.
I think if we can word it to focus on the need for staff to understand the underlying cost,
Mhm.
it then plays into our conversation
Yeah, are we losing
of
money?
fee schedule, right? Like they might recommend, hey, we should have a 20% markup on our cost, which is our margin. Wherever that falls with, and then like, but I just think like in November, to ensure they know what our underlying cost is, allows for them to recommend an appropriate fee for us in November.
Mhm.
And it can be compared and contrast as part of their memo to us of, hey, here's where the other fees are at. We might opt to increase our margin based off the regional average,
Mhm.
or decrease it based off trying to go after development.
Competitive, yeah.
Right.
But we need
Yeah.
staff to understand that cost.
So I don't know if I'm wording this right, thou shall not recommend fees that are not representative of the city's underlying operational costs for development. Plus,
Well,
Starting in a negative.
I know.
yeah, you got a double negative.
Fees that are not representative of will not recommend fees without understanding the city's underlying operational costs for development and staff.
yeah, I like that, without understanding the city's,
I think you could do a more of a general statement, thou shall not go without a operational process review annually.
oh yeah,
Just saying, hey, we should review what our process is, operational process and costing annually. It says, hey, you should just understand what your cost is for XYZ process on an annual basis. I think that covers, I mean, I'd love to actually see that broader, but
so recommend fees without understanding the city's underlying operational costs for development through an annual review process,
That's good.
right?
Yeah.
And then they bring that back in November,
Mhm.
and so she should be able to set up kind of an automated process for that. How do the other ones land? I know the comp plan was one that we wanted in there. Will somebody read that for me and make sure I'm not, like that double negative? I gotta get rid of these comments because
I struggle a little bit with the 10-year. I've heard anywhere from, hey, you should do it every 10 years to every 15 years.
yeah,
There's probably some market changes that say you should do it in 5 or 6 years. I don't know if I like the timeline of 10 or more of just updated, like
Yeah,
regardless of where we are time wise, I think we're at 8. But we're now saying, we publicly said, hey, we're not doing town square anymore.
yeah.
To me, it's outdated then.
So maybe we change this to say, thou shalt not allow the city to be without an adopted comprehensive plan, including a future land use that is not reviewed for updates every other year or something, you know.
By council appropriately, or
Well, you would go through staff and then planning commission eventually to council, but I mean, I don't even know that we gotta get that detailed. It's just, you need to take a look at it every other year for updates.
Sure.
And it's not that you have to do a complete overhaul, but just if there's sections that need updating.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was struggling with that 10-year thing too. Yeah, and then making sure our ordinances are updated and applicable.
Jen or Alex, anything on your side for any of those?
Yeah, for me on the fees and calculation one, I would go back to that. Was there any reference that we want to have some sort of benchmark in comparison to, right? Because obviously what we have there is the most important as it relates to how we operate our business. But ultimately, I would assume that in all of, most of the time, we're going to still ask for some level of reference point within kind of the region as how we compare, whether that's significantly better or significantly worse, where the council would be able to, make a decision based on, hey, if our costs are 20% higher than somebody else's, are our fees going to be 20% higher or not? So I don't know. I almost feel like we would still be asking for some sort of benchmark. And then I guess my follow-up question to that is, Anna, how accessible are benchmarks like that? Is it pretty manual for you to get those? Is that pretty easy for you to obtain for your monitoring reports and the data that you would provide?
I think once Carrie determines who those benchmarks are, I mean, it's manual in that you gotta go to either to their website or go to your contact at the city. But I think once she determines them, like who's she gonna use as benchmarks, she should be able to get them. And I think that's good information for you guys to look at routinely.
Yeah, and then trying to keep it as broad as possible. Jed, I think to your first question of ensuring that we get the data points, I think we capture that, or my thought is we capture that already in the new staff memo structure,
Yeah,
that they can't actually present it to us without having
data.
there to support the market, whatever the topic is.
Yeah, and Jed, to your point, as you were talking about benchmarks, I started typing regional benchmarks, but I actually think we just keep it more broad because sometimes regional comparisons aren't the best because they aren't the same population or they don't have the same, input of operational costs. And sometimes we want to include a more similar type size and structured community. So she might want to put in a statewide benchmark as well. Regional is, of course, the market, but comparatively, she might want to include a broader net of benchmarks there. So
I like that you have a general, including benchmarks, just so that the city staff can then, when they do bring it forward, bring the appropriate ones that they feel necessary as it relates to, right, here's how we compare in the market, here's how we look statewide with similar size cities. But ultimately, the market is really where and how we're going to be judged as the city when we're competing for growth and development with other cities that are local here. So.
Yeah, I like that. It just gave me a notice I had to add Alex, but he's must have gotten kicked off. I'll just keep watching for that. Yeah, I like that. I think that benchmarks piece, like we should look at our operational cost, but then also benchmark it. Okay, are we all good on this area? Because then I want to jump to one spot.
One under, are we leaving executive limitations?
Yes. Yep.
2.8.5, I guess. We are coming, or we're in a world where data requests are prevalent.
Mm-hmm.
And as we talk about to me, that area incidental information is like, hey, have on your radar that something's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I would like to have us include data requests in there.
that if data requests are being made.
Yeah,
Yeah. And just know that anything that comes in those, when you guys are getting those Friday updates, which I'm working on a more automated form for those to be incidental reports, but know that if there's something in there, like let's say there's a lawsuit and if somebody were to ever do a data request on those incidental reports that you're getting via email, we redact anything that would still be private. And so just know that any information that's shared out to you, like sometimes I'll tell you like, this is confidential, don't share it. If we were already data requested on that, we would redact that part. Okay. Let me go to Rob's question, which was 2.4. Okay, so this one is from Rob. Let me delete this comment so that you guys can see it better. Rob's point on this one was, and this has kind of come up as we've been talking some of these police officer positions is, oh, we can just use our capital funds to cover those wages for a little bit because our capital funds are healthy and then eventually it'll switch over to the general fund. And so it piqued EL that I think he would like to have in place, that those capital funds are meant for capital purchases and not your operational wages and benefits. Inevitably, what happens if you try to pay it out of there is that at some point it has to switch over to the general fund.
Right.
And you're just kicking the can down the road. Like those capital funds should be used for capital purchases, not operational. Does that make sense? And is it written to make sense? Take note that it does not include enterprise funds for that operational one, because we do pay staff wages out of our utility funds for things like our water operators and utility clerk, and that makes sense on the enterprise side because your enterprise is essentially your businesses that you're running. But on the capital side, it really should be capital and not operational in nature. Does that make, Jed, Alex, if you're on, does that make sense? And is it worded right?
Yeah, I think it's worded correctly. Makes sense to me.
Okay. So that was the only other edit on any other edits in ELs before we.
Can I just ask a question, since I was sick on Monday, just how that we worked through kind of some of that conversation when you talked about the police officer and some of this conversation as it relates to kind of where I think Stacey always says we have 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So I thought it would be, I don't know if you planned on that today, Anna, to kind of walk through that a little bit just to see, because I guess from my chair, my biggest fear is that we start making too many decisions in a vacuum and then it kind of backs us into a corner as it relates to tough choices of what does the actual kind of structures set up as it relates to how we're trying to put in board governance, but then we're making decisions that may impact our ability to adhere to that. I guess, I don't know if I made a lot of sense there, but I just feel like sometimes if we start making decisions that are longer term prior to the full discussion, we'll get into a place where we're maybe backed into a corner as it relates to some of the other things that we have into the board governance process.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great.
Period.
You want me to take that, Stacey? Is that what you said?
Jen, I'm wondering, are you talking specifically about the transition period that we're in right now?
Well, kind of. There was a request for a future staffing made at the council, and ultimately I was unclear, and I don't know if it came up in the discussion as to how that would be paid for long term. Which ultimately would it be a tax increase? So really, were we on Monday kind of talking about a tax increase, which is what our board governance says not to do. We want to keep it at 0%, some of those things. So I just, where will we find ourselves when we actually get into the budgeting process? Will we find ourselves back? Because I think all of us want to support, the police officers and make sure the city's safe. That's probably one of what I've heard of a lot of the other council members say is number one priority in our city. But we also might find ourselves at a place where, hey, 0% it's not even possible based on a decision we made months and months earlier without the anticipation of understanding how would we adjust the current budget with that request at the time the request is made.
Yep, I'm hearing you. So maybe if it's okay with everybody, I'll steal the screen because there is a couple things I want to just remind everybody about when you're operating in this foot in both worlds reality that you're going to be for a while. And then once we've been grounded in that, if there are pieces of that conversation from the council's meeting on Monday where you were gone, Jed, I did see, I'm aware of the issue. I saw the email threads, so I've got some working understanding of it, but I think it'd be good to ground us first in a bit of a reality check, if that's okay, everyone? Okay. So I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah.
This is pretty short and sweet, but I think it'll just help kind of set the stage a little bit. So we've got the current reality, which is how you've been governing for years. And then
We're not seeing anything yet.
Yeah, Stacy, it's not up yet, but it might be your.
Okay, let's give it a
There you
second.
go, now it is. There you go.
Yep, it's just the delay. So you can see simple table here. It's not that long. Current reality is the way you've been governing for decades or whatever. And then the right column is after activation, which is going to happen in October. So the current reality is that we need to remember that your policies that you've been slaving over for these last several months are still not live. I mean, Anna's still got to go to you and ask for permission or approval or whatever it is on a whole bunch of stuff that she won't later on. So everybody has to operate according to the old decision-making process or reality, even though your heads are in the new reality. And that's an awkward place to live in. It feels weird. It'll feel frustrating, and it'll feel ultimately, even with the best intentions, and there's a lot of thinking that you've done about waiting until October, it'll still feel like a long time of being in this purgatory, this place, right? So that's the current reality. After activation, when your policies are live, you've been very comfortable. In fact, you parrot the language back to me. Anna's going to be the quarterback. She'll be on the playing field that you've defined for her. She'll be calling plays. She'll be making decisions within her delegated authority, all of which has to meet that reasonableness code, right? So that's the thing that holds her into place. So even though now the transition place or period feels weird and frustrating and it will feel long, and even when the policies are activated, it's going to take time for all of you, Anna, staff, council members, to get into the groove of Anna having more decision-making authority on the field. There won't be that Mother May I thing. And that can set some of you back on your heels going, oh my God, I don't know. But you've built safeguards into the equation. Okay. So current reality, Anna needs to still come to the council for authority and decision-making. Post-transition, Anna's gonna face big decisions. She will. It's part of the work, right? She's going to face big decisions, has to use that reasonable interpretation, has to stay on your playing field to guide those decisions. But there's a whole lot of what about this situation? What about that situation? What about the situation that came up on Monday with the police officer grant opportunity? Well, a couple ways you can play it, or she can keep all of these things in mind. If Anna needs to make a decision that could put her out of compliance with one of your policies, whether it's an EL or an AN, she the board, the council, immediately and give her rationale. Just say, hey, heads up, I'm going to go out of compliance with this. Jed, you're familiar with how that works, right? It's going to happen. Doing my diligence. Sometimes, probably oftentimes, the council will go, yeah, get it. Thanks for letting us know. We figured that would happen. We're all aware of it. And part of being a good council member is being aware, because none of you want to be not aware of what's going on. She can also, if there's the luxury of time before a decision happens or has to be made, is to alert the council if she's looking through the breath, she's looking at her playing field going, geez, other than do not do anything illegal. The council really hasn't said anything about either specific issue X or the broader world in which X lives in. Hey, council, just wanted you to be aware that this is percolating around in our world, in the organization or the city. You've really not said anything about it. I'm going to go with what you have, always having to make reasonable decisions, but just wanted you to know that this is out there. That may give the council time to look at their playing field and go, you're right. Probably we need to develop another branch of policies like what we saw earlier when we were talking about the new planning EL. Or you're going to want to add another provision within an existing branch. Always being careful with that response that you're not just speaking to that one tiny little issue, but speaking as a broader level so that future issues that are related have some guidance. You got to find the sweet spot. Another option is that, and this has to be handled carefully by everyone. If Anna feels she would benefit from hearing the insights of the members on a particular subject, she could request time on a council meeting, either on the dais or in workshop, to say, this issue is percolating around. I know I've got to make the decision. You've granted me authority to make these decisions, but this is where I'm losing sleep. And I would benefit from hearing from your different perspectives, not because I'm going to take that as direction, but because you've got certain areas of expertise, you're wired into the community in different ways, you're going to see or hear different, perspectives on this that will help inform my thinking. That's when a good, healthy partnership can happen while still recognizing those lines of authority and responsibility. So I wanted to put that out there as context for you if you're already starting to feel icky about this living in both worlds place, which we know it will, or you're just worrying about those big decisions. So I'll stop here and see if you've got, I don't know, Jen, maybe you've had other ways that you've been able to make this work while still recognizing the authority that's been granted to a CEO. So I'll stop, see what you have to say.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I think that was Anna's response too, was just kind of timing here. But, for me, I just want to try to get my head around what should we expect a year from now? Like, what, just so that we're all kind of working. It's a great example. I think Anna even brought it forward and say, hey, maybe we can work through this with Stacy just to better understand, to say, hey, just so we don't make those decisions in a vacuum. So, because I know how hard it is from a staff perspective, right? We all know, and I'm sure she's got a lot of other leaders on her team. They're going to be asking for staff at budget time, and we're making a decision prior to budget time. And, ultimately, if it's anything like my budget season, it's, hey, we need 10 positions and we can afford 2. Well, if we've already made those 2 decisions earlier in the year based on a different reason, whether it be grant or something else, it just limits the ability, and then it might back us into a corner. And so from my chair, it was just more of understanding what does Anna think through that process. And maybe that comes out once we get onto the field a little bit more firmly with both feet on the field, so that I understand it. Like Anna's like, hey, I want to do this. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to make the adjustments to fall within, or I won't fall within the boundaries, or to your point, proactively going out of compliance. This is why. That's why I think it's important. That's the piece that I felt like I wasn't getting my head around. And then I obviously wasn't able to participate in the conversation. So that was a little bit of what I wanted to better understand.
Yeah, and Jed, to your point, like, being able to connect with Stacy on this, it was a super great exercise for me to walk through, because I was even struggling of how would this be handled in the future because of the grant portion of it. I initially was like, in the future, I think I'd have to tell our chief that you can't proceed with this because I know it's gonna put us out of compliance and we're not to budgeting yet. And this is, we're not able to do this. Stacy helped walk me through like, well, no, that's not necessarily what you'd have to do, but here's the steps of letting them know you're out of compliance. And then here's the narrative and the rationale of why it makes sense for you to be out of compliance because of this grant. So that was really good for me to walk through because I was having a hard time wrapping my head around how do we navigate that in the future, because it did come before the budgeting process. And I think we had a really good conversation on Monday around, yeah, we all agree, public safety, and just for your reference too, department heads have all collectively agreed that any positions that are added in 2025 should be law enforcement. So there won't be another request, it's just law enforcement. But so that part had been, box had been checked, but it inherently, it will put us, I can't say it with confidence, but I feel fairly confident that it will put us out of compliance somewhere. Now, where we ended up landing on Monday night was that, yeah, we all agree these positions are important. We want 2 officers a shift at night. But that present to the council, when we get to the preliminary levy, present to the council multiple different levers that we can pull. And it might not be just the tax rate, which is the angle that Brandon went down. It might be that we're out of compliance in a different area like debt or capital cash balances, or, we're going to have multiple different levers that we can present to you to pull. We just aren't there yet. We haven't pulled together all of our budgets to know exactly what that number will be and where we'll land. But Rob and I met yesterday and we already have 9 different levers identified that we think are opportunities that will work really hard to get down to 0%. It's just, we're not completely refined on them yet. But it was a really awkward, weird situation because we were trying to ask for staffing ahead of our budget process. And that felt really awkward and uncomfortable, mostly for Rob and I. I think, Brandon could present the data all day long of why we need those positions. But when it comes down to the money piece of it, it's not there. But it's also too early to tell. There's just so many factors that'll change between now and December to really with certainty say what lever we're going to need to pull. But so that's where we ended up landing.
A couple additional things on that I guess were running through my mind is, one, had we been live in this model, I actually don't think we would have been out of compliance. Because my understanding, you're able to hire temporary work.
Mm-hmm. I could have done
and
that.
So the two workers that were in question that were asked to, hey, can we give assurance to now? You could hire them in September when you're wanting to hire them to go through their training. So outside, there's 2 parts to this, right? It's 2 officers going through training starting in October, and they wanted assurance that, hey, when they graduate in March and start in April full time, that we would hire them as part of the budget. And then the second one is an individual officer that they just want to hire as a lateral transfer from another agency. But that they said they could wait until January 1. And so frankly, like, they could have done all of that while being in compliance because they've got the authority to make temporary hires, and the other ones wouldn't start until January. Now, because it's employment, the full-time employment is a little bit unique because council has to approve that yet. But had it been any other thing other than employment, they could have done that. Now, like I heard, hey, we're out of compliance from a budgetary stance. The book's wide open, right? Like, hey, just making up numbers. Hey, you've got to operate $9 million budget. If you want to add on a whole bunch of employment, you just have to take out from somewhere else. The pie is only $9 million. And so how you make up your pie of 80% employment costs or 90% employment costs really is up to you. There's a whole bunch of other things you have to achieve, right? So
Right.
It's going to be challenging.
Yeah, it's not, in this scenario, it wasn't possible. It's what we were saying. It's.
Yeah. And so what ended up happening on Monday night was, hey, we have to, as a council, we have to authorize the number of sworn officers that are allowed under our ordinance. We increased that 3 officers. And we were pretty clear of, like, you guys need to work to figure out how you can fund those officers, but you have our blessing to hire 3 officers. I think fire department today is authorized up to 35.
Yeah.
And we're at 28 now, right? Like, there's a variation there. And I think it went really well. Now, in the future, the one thing I do see different is I don't know that we have a police chief convincing us how to run, like how to do a budget or finance side of it, right? Like the police chief
Presents the need.
presents the need within their
Yeah.
department.
Yeah.
But I think we as council should be looking to Anna on, is this the priority? How are you funding within your ELs? Like, how are you doing this?
Mhm.
I don't know, I thought it was a great exercise for us to go through.
Yeah, because it picked up on my concern or doubt on this policy program being nimble enough to handle the daily changes,
Right.
hourly changes of a city operation.
Mhm.
Things change so quickly that it has to comply with so many requests, and then has to go back into the ELs and all that stuff to make sure, are we doing this correctly and are we able to move quick enough? Because if we're not, then it handicaps us in competing on certain things, for instance, a grant or maybe an offer on a property or something like that, so.
No, from a staff perspective, I mean, we've been talking about this for probably a month and a half of like, how do we navigate this weird timing? And then also knowing we've got 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And it was a really good exercise for us to go through of what this will look like today and what will it look like in the future and how that ask happens. And then, in the end, it all comes down to, we're gonna have to present a preliminary levy. We wanted to make sure it was clear Monday night that isn't gonna be, likely is not gonna be presented at 0% if we hire those officers, which I think we made that point clear. But we will present multiple levers of how we can get it to 0% by the final. It might be that we have to be out of compliance in other areas to be determined. There's, I think, potential costs that could be cut depending on how COLA shakes out and healthcare shakes out, or potential revenue adds that could be coming too. But we won't know that till later. But I think it was a good exercise for our staff to see, like, hey, don't just think narrowed in on tax rate. Like, there's other tools that you can use. It doesn't just have to be an assumption of like right away you got to go. That's one of them, and it could be a blend of multiple. Like, I think Ryan Monday night was like, hey, maybe it's actually, you have a chip on your shirt. Maybe it's actually a 1% tax rate increase, and then it's an adjustment of 3 other levers that help get us closer. So I think it was good. It was, to Tim's point, I was worried about the nimble piece of it. I'm like, am I in the future just going to have to say no to this grant, and we can't be nimble enough because of all this stuff? So being able to talk that through with Stacy of what that avenue looks like going forward is helpful.
But I think it first was framed up to me a little awkward, like, hey, we need 3 officers. Everyone agrees we need 3 officers. In order to do that, you need to have 3% increase in our budget. Like, no, those are 2 different things. Like, in the future, I think one of the things I look forward to in this is the future. It's not put to council to say, if you want 3 officers, you have to pay this, right? Like, that falls into your world
Justification.
of, you have to tell us what's the priority and how are you going to manage the budget if the priority is adding three officers. Like, I feel like we were in a no-win situation Monday night of, if we just said no, like, oh, the council doesn't support officers or law enforcement or the safety. And I think in the future, it's like, that's going to come out in a much different way with you running through this.
I want to be clear that with that 0% requirement, that is how I foresee it going in the future. Not before the preliminary levy, it'd be hand in hand with the preliminary levy, but if we get through the whole budget process and we know we cannot be at 0% and have this additional ask, we expect, and and understand as a department head crew and myself that you need to be able to have the data to show why you need above 0% and that you've exhausted every other option out there and that that is the only one left. And to be able to articulate that. And so I think that's what Brandon was trying to show is that, hey, these 3 officers could result in a 3% tax rate if we exhaust all those other options. Now, we haven't made it all the way through the budgeting process. And I think, Jed, to your point, that's where it feels like we're in a vacuum, and it definitely does, because we just made a decision that is going to predicate our budget. And now, I mean, we're going to come back to you with a budget that will likely be over 0% because we've agreed that we're going to hire these 2 and then potentially a 3rd. We'll present some options of what we can do. There's going to be multiple different levers. None of them are going to be real comfortable or great, but it's the reality of it. It doesn't have to be a tax rate. It could be other things, but it will result in some pros and cons. But in the future, there are going to be years where we can't achieve that 0%, and there has to be an avenue that we make a request outside of that. Hopefully that doesn't happen very often because our valuations, knock on wood, typically are in that 6 to 9% range, and we can easily cover and hit that 0. This is just an odd year. So I do think that part of it felt very funky because it was coming before we had even walked through any of this, but.
Yeah, and I think that's where the nimbleness of this comes from, right? It's the ability for you to be able to make those decisions, right? Of saying, I think it's been said here a little bit of saying, hey, these are the playing field. This is the boundaries that I have. This is the decision that is coming forward. I think it's a good decision. These are the 13 levers I think you just described that I'm looking at to still accomplish both being able to hire, go forward with the grant, as well as still get to the 0%. Should I not be able to do that? That's the piece where it felt like it was a bit short. I didn't have my head around of like, what are you thinking, Anna? Where are you headed with this from a budget perspective? Because that's the whole point of this being a nimble thing of saying, hey, Anna, you get to make the decisions within these boundaries. Go for it, like 3 police officers. And I think it's will come up more often than we think, you guys, because it comes up on grants a lot, right? Where we're, should we apply for the $100,000 grant? Well, it's a $1 million project, right? And so if we get the grant, then do we feel like we should say no to 100,000? But we still have to spend 900. So just having the context, because that's going to come up often. I think it already has in my time here, where we'll go forward with grants. They always happen prior, and then all of a sudden we win, and it's like, well, yes, I want a new fire truck, and I love the fact that we got $500,000 or whatever it might be. But what's the actual cost? Or we got funding for this road, but it wasn't in our actual plan for next year, and now we have an additional expense. And so having the context from you of saying, hey, I still think we move forward with this grant, or I think we should move forward because I don't have a lever to pull unless you guys want to proactively go out of compliance. Those are the really kind of the way I would present to my board of saying, hey, this is the adjustments I'm going to make. If I can't make them, this is the outcomes that are going to actually be as a result of this. I'm still recommending X, whether it be to go forward or not go forward. And then we can have that active discussion of, do we feel comfortable adding the expense or having a different budget come forward that's outside of the current board governance and those things. But I think the nimbleness comes from the fact that you get to make those decisions. That's the beauty of the government's process of, hey, I want this to happen. And ultimately, these are the ways that I'm going to still try to accomplish everything that you had. And that was the piece where I wasn't getting it from reading the material, and I didn't have a good understanding of what the thought process was. And I think where we don't want to find ourselves is a place where we made a solid decision on behalf of the police, because I think everybody in the room, as I've heard multiple times, support that decision in and of itself. But we just don't know what other decisions it's going to be compared to here in 3 months. And then if you were to compare those 3 tough decisions next to one another, we might have had a different discussion. And that's the piece I didn't have my head around.
Mm.
No, I agree. I'm not sure I have my head around it yet. Like that's the unfortunate part of the timing of it. But I do agree.
Jill, were you going to say something, Jill? I thought I heard your voice in there somewhere. Jill?
I don't know if it's relevant anymore. I think it was a unique situation, and obviously it does come up, but we're making a commitment to individuals whose livelihoods would be affected. And so I think that's where the advance notice to council was important, because if we had approved it previously, but Chief coming forward and helping us understand that there is a financial implication. And again, this is in the old world we're living in. I think it was a courtesy to us, for us to know going into the budget season, because the last thing we would want to do is have these two cadets go through the program and then have no
Long-term job. Yeah.
long-term job.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that, and I think that was, I feel like that was the intent.
I'm gonna pull us back together here because it's 7 minutes to 2. And so we've eaten into some time with the binder
That's okay.
documents. Can we do that pivot? Is that all right with
Yep.
everybody?
And I think these binder documents will probably go faster than I even anticipated, but.
I'll go for it.
Okay, just to close out that conversation though, I will say, I appreciate all the feedback and bear with me as I gain confidence in this new process, because I think that is a piece of it too, of not being used to making those decisions and knowing you have the support, you have the confidence, if you provide the right justifications and information behind it to support it, that confidence is there. And that's gonna take me a little bit to get used to, because frankly, I'm used to, and our team is used to falling back on the council. Like, and I mean that with all due respect, but you've kind of been a crutch for us because we can take those hard decisions and bring them to you and you help us make them. And so that's going to take some time, both for me and department heads, to build that confidence of, hey, you're in this role for a reason, provide the justification and the information so that we can make our decision easier and not have to be in a no-win situation at the dais. So bear with me as we navigate through that. Okay, binder documents. I'm not gonna go through every one of them because I think most of them you guys have seen. I wanted to call it out to you guys, the ones that are new. And so if you have your binder in front of you, I'm gonna go through each section just so you know what they each are, but first section is your policies. So those are your 4 core quadrant policies. Next section is your monitoring reports. Right now you have in there all the draft ones. I wouldn't spend a ton of time looking at them because they're nowhere near done, but just wanted to give you an idea of what those might look like. I still have to do the monitoring reports for the ends. If you go to the tab under monitoring reports that's titled Summary Compliance Monitoring Report. So this, I gave you guys one in front of you here, and Jed, I'll get it to you as well. I've seen this presented in a couple different ways, but it's basically meant to just show you, if you look at all the monitoring reports in 1 year collectively, like where are they at in compliance or out of compliance? Instead of having to page through each report one at a time, it just throws them all on one. And then I just handed out to you guys, and let me see if I can pull it up for Jed here. I just handed out for you a summary spreadsheet that you should have in your files there, right underneath the agenda. Just to me, that visual is more helpful than anything else of like each month, what are we going to be actually looking at? We have the council calendar, which we will get to, but so it's this one on the screen. Jed, can you see what I just pulled on the screen? Probably not. Hold on.
No, I still see the agenda.
If you share your desktop,
This one?
then everything, yeah, then everything is on your screen, they can see.
Now can you see it?
I can see the beautiful picture of the dam.
You must have dual screen.
I don't know. Carrie messed with something on here so that it doesn't, I'm guessing whatever she did, it doesn't show. That's fine. Bear with me. Just go the long way. So I just tried to make each month, what are the items that you're gonna be reviewing? Just this visual, I've seen it done a few different ways. This visual's kind of nice. So if we activate in October, our next report will be EL 2.7 and then council quadrant assessments 3.4, 3.5, 3 points. Just kind of lays out for you guys, like each month, what can we expect? Now, the other, the summary tab will have a little bit more detail on it of are they in compliance or not for each one. your council calendar, which is also in your binders, is the real in-depth, like, okay, when are we handling each monitoring report? When are we doing our linkage events? When are we doing self-assessments? Everything is on that one. And so it's a kind of a couple different formats of how you're seeing the same information, basically, depending on how you prefer to look at it, if that makes sense.
Didn't we talk about for the first year having a higher frequency on some of this report out?
I think we talked about having them reviewed at workshop first. So higher frequency of seeing them at a workshop, and then they'd eventually come to a regular council meeting. Do you, Stacy or Jed, do you recall?
That's what I recall. Like just the first year, the first time you'd see a report, seeing it in workshop early in the cycle so that the council members could get comfortable with the interpretation and the measurement indicators, kind of work out the bugs. Not ever to tell Anna how to interpret, but just where things are maybe gappy or, and also just to get you in the loop. Because that first year is awkward and it's scary to wait for a whole year sometimes before you'd see an interpretation in the data. It's like, oh my God, if that's not reasonable, then what? So yeah, that's what my memory was.
Yeah,
If
that's
that's
why
helpful.
that scary piece is why I know we had a conversation about it more frequent. I guess I don't recall the workshop. Maybe that can work. One of the conversations on workshop we had is turning them into more educational and not feedback, or not like directional conversations, but more workshops should be educational. And one of the pages talked about just that. They should be they should be educational so that we all have a baseline that's equal to start from when we discuss or deliberate a topic at the dais. So I feel like those maybe are counter then.
Well, our workshops, educational, reasonable assessment of interpretation. So that's your first look at monitoring reports.
Okay.
Community linkage, council's own performance assessment, your annual calendar retreat planning, and then any initial policy and ordinance language development. So I think that's where we were kind of thinking, let these come through your workshop first, so we get our feet underneath us and look at that reasonable assessment before it comes to a regular council meeting, so you guys have more frequency, at least in this first year. Maybe we'll get a better rhythm down after that, but. And that is why I mean, they're very draft. I think it gave Stacy a little bit of a heart attack that I put them in the binders already at such a draft state, but like, I want you guys to be able to see kind of where we're headed on some of those. I think I got to put Rob's in there yet, but just so you get a sense of what do those interpretations look like and what kind of data will we provide, and to kind of see them ahead of time.
By bringing it to workshop first, are we actually creating more frequency, or are we just creating more comfort and discussion?
More review, yeah, comfort and discussion, review. I think it'd be really hard to increase frequency because, as you can see, there's a lot of reports. Like if we did them twice a year, or you'd be inundated.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I just want to make sure we're all understanding that, as Stacy talks, like, hey, some of these we won't see till next December. As she put it, and I agree, like that's scary. We're bringing them to workshops simply to have more comfort and conversation. We're not actually creating more frequency, which I think is what we're saying. I'm hearing others, like, how do we create more frequency? Not in a full depth report, but maybe more of a compliance, non-compliance, right? Like, 2.8, I don't know what that is, but it's on here as December.
Yeah, communication and support to council.
It's
Yep.
communication. Yep.
Pick any one of them, 2.8. Like early on, can we just get the signal of in compliance or out of compliance?
Oh, like a summary
Not a full
report.
report out, but to me, that offers not only the three of us that are gonna be here in January, but the two that don't have a clue about this.
Yeah.
some level of assurance of, hey, like, I know we won't talk about 2.8 until December, but we're in compliance now, so we're good. Or, hey, we're out of compliance. Can you give us 2 sentences as to one sentence of why we're out of compliance, one sentence of what we're working on? I don't know. I feel like that helps us overcome this first year transition a lot better.
Stacy, let me propose something because I see you with your hands above your head stressing.
That's my, no, I'm not, this is my thinking position. Go ahead.
So one of the things that I think could maybe work, to Ryan's point, we had talked at the last training of how do we ensure that there is still an assessment of the city administrator's performance, since it's tied directly to the performance of organizational performance with policy governance. And in one of the books, the recommendation was that the performance be reviewed with your summary compliance form, so that council can really look at that summary compliance form and see like where are we in and where are we out. And so that'll be this December that they would do that performance assessment of me, and I'll need to provide that summary compliance form anyways. And so at that time, to Ryan's point, I can at least give a really, like, they won't have seen the monitoring reports yet, but I can at least give them a red light, green light, yellow light. Here's where things are at, to give that level of comfort of, all right, if we're out of compliance on that one, is like the sky falling, or is it something that we can address when we get to a later stage?
Yeah.
We're gonna have to anyways as a part of my my performance.
Yeah. I mean, it's not fair. If you're gonna assess Anna's performance in December and she has another 6 months to reach the point of submitting a monitoring report on ELX. It's not necessarily fair to say you're going to grade her on where she is right now when she still has 6 months to get in compliance, for example. So I'd be a little cautious with that. Maybe not put too much stock in it, or just include those policies that have been monitored by December and say, we're going to do a performance reviews just based on these 3, because that's all we have. Is this a hill I want to die on? No. Well, another option that I'd throw out for all of you, and this is only feasible because Anna's been such a rock star in getting her interpretations and her compliance indicators so far along before you've even activated your policies, is to set aside a workshop and you're looking at all of them, all of the interpretations for all ELs right out of the gate, and say, yeah, we're comfortable in your initial statement that this is a reasonable interpretation and these compliance indicators are reasonable. Just do them all at once, and then be able to sit back and go along the sequence of timing that's reflected on the screen. Is it a little bit of extra work? Yeah, on the front end, but you'd have that clear picture in your brains, kind of like what you felt like when you finally had all of the quadrants together in your brains. You'd have all of the interpretations and the compliance indicators, at least the best she's got them. She always has to have the right to flex as issues come up. That's related to the nimbleness thing. So that's another option. Do that.
I'm even thinking, if we activate October 14th, we already have a workshop scheduled. We'll be done with the budget by then. We could use the workshop that night and go through each. It doesn't have to be in great depth. There's going to be things out of compliance because there's items that department heads and myself have to work through, but at least it gives some level of comfort before we kick this thing off full-fledged. That could work too.
Yeah. And it's really just this transition year, right? You're not going to feel this need to look through every year. You're just anxious, of course.
Well, and I think sorry, go ahead, Jed.
Well, I was just gonna say, what you just said, Stacy, was what I thought we had talked about prior, were to have just kind of some placeholders built into our schedule where we did have kind of, let's look at the model as a whole, not just what, are the current ELs that are on the timeline for this workshop to see how we're doing. Just so that we had a point in time, because we all know how our workshops and all our meetings go, and Stacy's had got to experience this, how we don't always get to everything on our agenda. So if it's not its own, like, hey, this separate meeting is really about going through all the Ls, or this separate meeting is or workshop alone is only for us to review how do we think it's going so far. Just having those checkpoints, just to have the ability to discuss it, right? Because information this first year and strong communication, I think, is going to be really, really important. And then conscious awareness of the heavy lift that it's going to be for Anna and her team. That's the other thing we have to be very conscious about, especially if we have some of this extra work happening. It's not an easy lift for the staff in that first year either. And so I just want to have ability or places in a checkpoint where we get to actually say, hey, that's the agenda item. Let's talk through this. How's this feeling? Is it too much, too little? How's it going? Just because getting all those data points and all the things that they're going to be doing on a lot of these monitoring reports is going to be a heavy lift. So I would love to have those checkpoints built in. One, can we review the model as a whole? How do we think it's going? Anything major concerns, anything we love? And then how is it going for staff? And just having those be very specific dates and times, maybe 2 or 3 times throughout next year, where that's the whole intent of whatever meeting or workshop that we're in outside of the normal reviews.
And that can be built in right on your annual planning calendar.
Yeah, I just made a note of that.
Yeah.
So a couple things that I heard there that I think really makes sense as I think about how do we not only wrap this up, but then how do we support it? And Jen, I think you called it all really well, is we need to over communicate. I think as part of that in the first year is we've got to build trust, and trust is built 2 ways. But I would love that October 14th workshop, if our current council can review the interpretations.
The monitoring report, yeah, all of them.
All of them, because we're the ones that have gone through the trenches here to build up this program.
Yeah, that's true.
And to kind of like give that final thumbs up, let's go. But I also recognize that 40% of our council is turning over.
And we'll be the ones that are actually reviewing.
And so I also think like, hey, some point in, and I don't know that we want to set a date now, but some point in Q1, January might be too early as they're figuring things out as a new council member, but at some point, like, have them review it.
Mhm.
Because the other 60% can carry that through of, hey, we just reviewed this in October, it's working, we believe it works, and we can demonstrate to them. But I feel like we've got to go through some of that routine in the first year to build the confidence, build the trust. I don't like the idea of this sample being tied to your review for the first year. I would agree. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's accurate. So I would just advocate that we do the
October,
end of January, early February reviews of interpretation.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And Stacy, I just made a note too that, once new council members on board, there'll be a level of training that you'll take place with them, and maybe that can be a good timing to go through all the monitoring reports with them as well.
Yep.
So I made that note too. Okay, so that's your calendar. The other spreadsheet that you have there and also is on the screen, if I can get my mouse to work, is, and not saying that you have to necessarily use this spreadsheet, but it's when you're reviewing the monitoring reports, it breaks it down into, the things that you're looking for. Is it a reasonable interpretation? Is the data support the reasonable interpretation? Any notes? And then, do you believe it's in compliance? So that's what that massive spreadsheet is in there. You'll have electronic access to all of this too, in the event that you want to use the one on the screen, but we just printed it off so you have visibility of understanding how to do those monitoring reports from your perspective. And then there's the step-by-step guide in there too for how to do them as well.
And as you talk about electronic,
Yeah.
Maybe a side note or ask is there an ability for IT staff to stand this up electronically for us with restricted access.
Where you can edit and,
Not edit, but I don't think any of us wanna walk around with this. And so like at some point, we're
Yeah.
gonna want to review things
Mhm.
to like, hey, how does this work? How does this fit in? And I see this getting a lot of dust on it.
Yeah.
Virtually, I don't. I would love for us to interact in it more.
we've been
With
trying
full
to.
respect to open meeting law, like that's
Yeah.
why I wouldn't wanna have edits in there,
Mhm.
but just a read-only version that council can access.
Yeah, we've been bouncing our head around, like, cause you guys don't have access to SharePoint because your Office 365 account is a limited version, so cause we don't pay as much for it. But so far what Kaya has done is put it on like a restricted web page on our website. And you'll notice that when we get to the back of this, there's some QR codes, like she's got like all of our administrative policies on there, so I'm leaning towards that being the area, but I gotta flush that out a little bit just to make sure that it is actually restricted and you're not gonna have general public playing around in documents. But yes, that's on my radar. I will connect more on that. Okay, so now we're in the annual planning, which in that section, you've got the council memo that has all your, regular meeting calendar dates, and then the planning calendar that we just went through is in there. And then also your council appointments are in there. So none of that is, we just went through the planning calendar, so that isn't new anymore. Community linkage is your NCS survey, so we put a QR code to the full results and then the PowerPoint in there. Council meeting info. That's the new city council meeting agenda template. That's not new. You've seen that. The staff memo that is new, Kaya rebuilt this and it is all locked down, so nobody can change fonts or design of it, and they are not allowed to move on to the next section until they fill in the top section. It's built in an automatic Adobe form, and so this will be new going forward. Couple new categories in it. They'll have to call out whether it's a monitoring decision making, or incidental. They'll have to call out policy quadrant and provision. They need to call out their bias declaration, which is titled on here as factors of influence. They need to call out relevant data, context and historical information, financial impact, and then also perspectives. Make sure they're including the perspectives of multiple departments and then any external perspectives. And then the council recommended action. So this is it isn't too wildly different. It just has more categories to it than what you're going to be used to seeing. But I think we've all talked about how that level of detail is important and critical. And I even think to Monday's decision, had we been using this template, I mean, to Jed's point, I think some of that narrative and background information would have been helpful in making that decision knowing that ahead of time. So that will be new for you.
Is there a place on there that, like, at the very beginning, there can be a description of what it is?
Just like a little,
Sometimes
yeah.
I get down and I'm like, wait, I don't even know what we're talking about yet.
Agreed.
Okay,
So
Got it.
just
Yeah.
a general, like,
yeah,
before you tonight is blah, 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 blah.
yep. Yep, just a brief description.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that.
Yeah, there's a couple of them I've gotten into and I'm like, what am I? It's got the pillar in there. I'm like, community, whatever, pillar.
Yeah, you're like, this doesn't even match.
What? I don't get what I'm looking
You're
at.
like,
Well, and sometimes
I'm healthy.
Yeah.
sometimes you can read from that summary description, like, is this like a really in-depth one that I need to go through, or is it, yeah, no, I can add that. The next tab is, Ryan, you were just mentioning this, the breakdown of what's gonna be at each type of meeting. So the meeting principles. The next tab is just a bunch of resources, so none of these are new to you. It's your training booklet that you've had already. It's your, policy governance 101. You've seen all of those. The next section that is new for you is council self-assessments. We've talked about these, but I don't know that you guys have actually ever seen the forms. So Kaya remade these forms from some of the books that Stacy recommended. So one is a council meeting monitoring form. So this is just for you guys to self-assess, like, hey, how did that meeting feel? And kind of check boxes like meets or does not meets or something that we want to talk about. And then the next one is a more overarching council self-assessment guide of like, how are we doing as a council overall? And these self-assessments are scheduled on your planning calendar. So you don't need to panic of like, oh, do I need to do this right now all the time? It's called out on your planning calendar. Just wanted to give you visibility for what it looks like. So that is new to you. Okay, and then the final item, and I elaborated a little bit on this one, and I know we've talked about it a couple times, is we put the city code in there and didn't put the whole city code. We just put the city code title 1, which is really the general provisions applicable to council. So it's general provisions, mayor and council fees and charges, excessive use of city services, and then whatever chapter 5 becomes, which right now is titled as, I think at one point we talked about it as code of ethics and then kind of shifted to code of conduct. I did send over to you guys, what's in there right now is a pretty extensive code of conduct. And I think we've talked about how maybe that isn't the right code of conduct that we're looking for. It's also really heavy. It is really heavy to conflict of interest. Like it's very business, if you own property or businesses, and I think everyone that we've looked at has been really heavy conflict of interest. And so I got the impression from our last meeting that, hey, this maybe needs to shift to something a little bit simpler and not something that we already have in policy, because then what's the point of having it in a code of conduct? And so I provided you with some samples of regional examples and then also statewide examples. And then the St. Joe had a really simple, brief, short and sweet code of conduct that also applies to commission members and council. I attached in what you guys have in front of you right now, and Jen, I'm going to pull it up for you, those samples. But then what I also did is at the end,
Well, and
yeah.
Anna, if I could
Yeah,
interject here, I'm the one that on the actual agenda was feeling pretty strongly about underscoring and putting in the language. There really is a real need for a broader code of conduct beyond what's in your policies, because it lands in the place where you're speaking to yourselves as a council. It's not speaking to the larger community. So you have, unless you're putting something in your city code, you're not protecting the city in terms of things related to code of conduct. So there is a real need for broader code of conduct, not just within the council itself. That's important, but you've got to also cover other commissioner members, et cetera, et cetera. It just has to be in multiple places. So enough said for me. I just feel pretty strongly about that one. That is a hill I'd die on.
So with that, and Jed, can you see this on the screen? I basically took the St. Joe one and tried to kind of, it's only one page. It's nothing. Our last one was like 4 pages long. It's pretty short and sweet of like, hey, if you're an elected official or a commission member, here's the things that we expect of you. Like, don't have a conflict of interest. Don't solicit gifts. Don't accept gifts. Don't share information that you're not supposed to ahead of time. Don't hold incompatible offices. This was St. Joe's almost word for word. And then it literally just says, if that happens, the council reserves the right to either choose to do a hearing or some other action. And through that process, they can do a variety of different things. And it can be, they can censure a person. Of course, that'd be on the city council side. They can refer to criminal prosecution if it's to that level. Most often it wouldn't be, but you can request them to not participate. You can require a leave of absence. You can remove them altogether or any other action that the city council wants. And it's pretty short and sweet, broad, 1-pager, but I think it's probably more of what we're looking for than the 4-page conflict of interest, you've got to disclose your business entities, property. I mean, you can go that direction, and I hope that in the samples I provided you, it showed you that every city kind of does it different. But I mean, even in our region, St. Joe's is as short and sweet as this. Sauk Rapids is like 12 pages long and includes everything, probably everything that's in our procedural guide. So wanted to get a pulse on this. I am trying to follow the feedback and direction from you guys of where we think we need to land on this. And I just got the sense after the last one that I maybe wasn't hitting the mark on what we were trying to get after, and that we just maybe needed to really simplify it.
I guess what I struggle with at that bottom paragraph, like all of that's already available to us as a council.
The complaint and hearing process.
Yeah, like we can initiate a hearing, we can initiate a censure.
But this is saying that if they violate those things, it triggers that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
right now, there's nothing that spells out what would trigger you to call that hearing.
Yeah, no, I agreed.
But yes, you can do all those
I
things.
don't think we're giving ourselves any greater authority. We're not reducing our purview or ability. I would be inclined to be part of the, I think, take the St. Joe and probably copy and paste a lot of it over. But I also look in here, like, we do have some good, oh, where was it? The conflict of interest disclosure, I
Yeah.
think is,
And that's through your policies, not through ordinance, so that's perfect. Yeah.
no, I think that's spot on. There was a couple other, that I'm like, hey, this actually speaks to, I think, the core of what we want to do.
Yeah, and I think that, like, to your point, I mean, we have that conflict of interest covered in our governance process quadrant and that disclosure form, like it, based on the discussions at the last meeting, I felt like you guys were all kind of collectively saying, like, why would we put that in an ordinance when we already have it in a policy? Like,
But
Where-
that's
you know.
just for the council members.
yeah, but
Correct.
the ordinance that we had drafted was pretty similar language.
Hmm.
And it was replicated. This, I think, gets more to the core of like, what is the purpose of the code of conduct? It's, hey, if you're gonna be elected or you're gonna be appointed to a commission, here's the expectations.
Yeah.
The purpose statement that they had, I thought that really spoke, I think, exactly what we're trying to do. Like, we are trying to provide standards for conduct in hopes that it promotes the faith and confidence of the citizens of the city of Sartell in the government to encourage them to serve. Like, we want them to see a really, positive environment here between our council and between our elected, or maybe between our appointed officials, so that they eventually would maybe even be excited to serve.
I think it's easy to say we should have it everywhere. I think we have to strike a balance between encouraging people to run while holding those that are elected accountable.
Mhm.
I look at, we have 2 seats open, we had 3 people out of our entire community of 20,000 people apply. Like, that to me isn't a larger pool. Like, how do we encourage more to do that as we add more? I don't think it encourages more.
I'm sorry.
While I also, hey, if you're elected, like, we need to be held accountable. We need to be held to a standard. And if you're not, there's certainly ramifications in place if you're not, but I don't know, I struggle on that. It's a pendulum and I don't want to swing it hard one way or the other because it's going to swing back.
I don't think people don't run for office because they fear a code of conduct or,
No, not individually, correct.
so I think, I think it's a tough, especially with, I think that gets back to just, there's been division in the community and there's a spotlight and that is not for everybody, right? So, I think having structure like this, policy governance, will help tremendously because it really, it makes things much more,
Black and white.
yeah, in my,
Predictable, yeah.
So, but I don't think anybody would be like, well, I run for office, but I can't abide by that code of conduct. Then you don't want him to run anyways, right?
Agreed. I look at it as a attribute to the whole, that. Yeah, I do agree that board governance, I think, takes less time off
Yeah,
potentially,
Yeah.
elected officials' plate, and I think
Yeah.
that encourages as well, but. I don't know, what I saw in here, other than on the procedural guide, like show me fingered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like. I do without that, but other stuff in here, I think is good.
Do we, before we move on to the procedural guide, because I'm looking at our agenda, Stacy, that is the next thing on our agenda, but do you want me in my Friday update to send out this St. Joe copy paste version
Mhm.
and let you guys kind of noodle on that a little bit?
Yes.
And that would be helpful, I'm assuming, to kind of dive into that a little bit more, and then we tabled that at a public hearing already, so that, part of it is done. So when it comes back to council, it's not a public hearing, that portion of it has been done, it's just a review and approval. Okay. Stacy, are you good with jumping to
Well,
the,
what I think is that everybody deserves a bit of a break. Could we take a break before we just dive right into the procedural guide? Is that all right?
Sure.
that works?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep. So if you want 10 minutes,
that gives me a chance to
15
get kind of
minutes.
set up, and I think Jed has to get, oh no, that was at 3. You gotta jump off at 3, you're gonna switch to your phone?
I'm gonna switch my phone in about 15 minutes, so I'll be on. I just might not be able to participate as much. I have to go grab my daughter quick, so.
Okay. So 10-minute break, come back at 2:40. Does that sound all right?
Yeah, that works.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I get that, like, what is that smell?
Those late August,
I just moved the bag.
The roasted garlic. That was.
Yeah, remember the last time with the broccoli? We all were talking to that superintendent and like gagging over broccoli. Okay. No one getting excited for,
Yeah,
The
I
next
think
phase.
so, yeah.
I'll never understand that world.
It's gonna come up really quick.
So what happens after that? Like you go, where do you go from Bismarck? College? Collegiate play?
He has 2 years of eligibility left at junior, so he could, you don't know. I mean, you could play 1 more year, you could play 2 more years. But the goal is you get picked up by a college or something.
That's so wild. So like college hockey players are actually 20.
30 with children.
Yeah, like grown men with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like when you're watching football now and they're like, and it's, the quarterback's 7th season. He's
Yeah.
a graduate student with 1 child.
It's been married for 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, but yeah, he's getting excited. It's just gonna come up so quick. And it's literally 3 weeks away. So, and I know those first 3 weeks are boot camp.
Really? I would have not done well at anything like that. Not my jam.
There's nobody can get logged into the EHR.
Oh. Hey, does anybody plan to go to the regional cities meeting? Should ask Tim when he gets in here. Next Tuesday. They're asking for an RSVP count.
next Tuesday, is it?
Yeah, it's in Wake Park. No,
I can go, I think.
Okay. I have it on your calendar. It's on council calendar. Like you've got the invites. You should have all the details you need. I'll just be gone on vacation, so.
Where are you going?
We're gonna just do like the Badlands, Mount Rushmore,
Oh, fun.
you know. Attempt to survive a car ride for 8 hours with 3 kids, but it's just too hard to sneak anything more than that in
Yeah,
when they're in activities and.
you probably don't want to be driving right now or flying right now.
That is true. Jace got stuck in Alaska for almost 2 days
Did you really?
from that mess. Yeah, and then they were gonna fly him to Newark, New Jersey for 8 hours. And then fly to Minneapolis. I'm like, this is ridiculous. He had 370 pounds of fish. I'm like, I'm not touching that fish if it sits in an airplane body for 8 hours. Like, you're better off just staying there an extra day. But yeah, he got stuck in that mess. I'm just glad they got back. I'm still reading that there's people still stuck.
His brother and his daughters got stuck going home to Florida and he finally just got her in a car and drove.
No way.
Mhm.
Cause it got that bad. We were literally looking into that. I'm like, I think you guys just gotta jump in a car and drive back, but it was 52 hours. And the only way to get back from Alaska is to go through Canada. And he doesn't have a passport. Like he doesn't have one. I didn't send it with, like, I didn't even think about it. So he would have,
And without you there,
I know, I'm like,
you wouldn't have been able to get him through it.
Right.
Anyways.
right.
Mhm.
And so that wasn't an option. It's like, okay, you literally can't do anything but wait until they find you a flight. Yeah, it was wild. They ended up going to get a hotel room for one of the nights and it was $750. Cause there were so many stranded people that needed hotels. It's like,
Well, the airline needs to pick that up.
well, that's what, I mean, we'll still be arguing with them about it, but
Mhm.
yeah, just wild. He drove from Florida to here.
From here to Florida home. Mhm.
Was it like 20 some hours? Holy cow.
Yeah. Good, how are you today? Right. Yes. Let's see if I can see that.
Gosh, I need glasses. Need to wear my glasses.
So Anna, this is Stacy, if you can hear me, just to let you know, I'm gonna have to leave at 3:50 today. I've got a 4 o'clock appointment down and around the corner, so 3:50 is when I've got to be done.
No problem.
Okay.
I
But it
probably
looks like
kinda
the
need-
last. Hmm?
I can run through like if we get to the transitional time, then I can do that without you. And
Yep, that's what I kind of figured, yeah.
I have a 4 PM meeting with our amateur baseball teams too, so I'll probably kind of need to hop
Okay.
off around then as well.
So given the pace for what we've covered so far, what's your thought about how much time you're gonna need to get through both halves of the procedural guide?
You know, honestly, a lot of it, I was looking through it this morning and even a lot of that they've seen before. So we might not need that much time. I mean, I think let's just
Okay.
kind of start diving into it and
Okay,
see where we
Okay.
land. I'm gonna
Okay.
go find Tim. I'm guessing he's back talking to Carrie.
okay.
Depends on how fast we go through this. Okay, I found him.
Wasn't really 10 minutes, was it?
You still have 2 minutes.
See,
You're on time, Tim. Actually, you're early. Should write that down. Uh-huh.
found a piece of pineapple on me in the back room. I'm like, where's?
I know. There's a chip earlier. No. Okay, and Jed texted me and said he'll hop on by phone, and so we'll just kind of keep plugging away and eventually,
You know what happened to Alex? Is he just,
I don't know, it came up that he was trying to get on and then I never saw his name again, so.
okay,
People added to can't read what that says. Okay. All right, Stacey, you want me to start on the
Yep.
procedural guide? Okay.
Yipper.
Okay, so this next section after the city code is procedural guide. A lot of this you've already seen, but we'll just go page by page and I want to make sure if there's edits that we capture them. So the first section is city council orientation. So that just lays out what does that orientation process look like for new council members? How do they make sure they get their training from Stacy for policy governance? Thinking about the fact that new council members will get these same documents, like how can we just briefly explain, like, here's what policy governance is, like, if you can remember these, core pieces of it, it should help guide you. So that's what that next section refers to. And honestly, this was a good exercise for me to go through as well, because I've done the same with staff, which is helpful. The next section is something that you guys had requested, or someone had requested in one of our training workshops, is deliberation and decision making, and mentioned the 5-finger consensus tool. I've never used that before. I'm not sure how that actually, like, the application of that in a meeting. I had to read it like 6 times to understand actually what's happening. But I put it in here. I mean, maybe it's something good to just have. It's certainly not a requirement, but a tool more than anything.
Do you want me to give you the 30-second take on
Yeah, you
5-finger
probably should.
consensus?
Probably more
Yep.
so for Ryan, because he's the one that would have to run it.
Absolutely. Yeah, Ryan. So if you're in a workshop
where does
and
this
you're
meet?
kicking,
Don't lead with that one.
which is usually what some smart aleck brings up. So you're right on.
There's always one.
So Ryan, let's say you're in a workshop and you're talking with the council on a new policy, a new EL, or a new branch, or a new provision with an EL, and you're wanting to get a sense of where it's landing. And you want more nuances than this or this. You can
Mostly a nod or a shake.
Well,
Yeah.
you can use 5-finger consensus. And so the idea here is 1 finger up means you love that recommendation. 2 fingers up means you like that recommendation. 3 fingers up, and this is really important, means you can live with that recommendation. Your goal is to get everybody up to a love, like, or live with status, because you're never going to get everybody up to a loving something. It's just not, it's not in human nature. 4 fingers up means I'm leery about that recommendation. There's something that's not quite right. And 5 fingers up, I loathe that recommendation. Love, live with, like, leery, loathe.
It's like the cold.
So once everybody says, this is where I am at, Ryan's doing a quick kind of read across the room. And he's saying, okay, Jill, you had 4 fingers up. There's something you're leery about. Tell us what that is. And if you've got a recommendation about how to tweak the recommendation or the decision on the table or whatever it is, we want to hear that too. Likewise, if somebody's got 5 fingers up, like, man, I'm really hating that recommendation, you ask them the same question. So some of it, the onus on tweaking the recommendation or the thing in the middle of the table rests with those that are leery, loathing, to say, here's what I do to get me up to at least I can live with. but it gives you so much more information than just yes or no. So I use this visually with people. I also have tables. So if I'm working virtually with a group, say, and using something like Jamboard or Mural, I build those in there and people can put their vote, their 5-finger vote right on the screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is, it's catching on like wildfire all over the place with the clients that I use, because there's so much more to it than just yes, no. So that's what 5-finger consensus, and that was longer than 30 seconds. I'm sorry.
The description in the book is different.
Oh, boy.
No,
Uh-oh.
Sorry. I
It
think it's.
was a copy paste off of the web, so. I
is
should
that
maybe have
the,
you. Well, Stacey, I
Yeah.
think you should I should maybe have you read through it, because how you just explained it, if we could summarize that in like 1 paragraph instead of this like
Yeah, you're opposite.
7-paragraph thing here,
Okay.
that might be good.
Yep, Yep.
So I'll make a note to have you look at that
sure.
5, and then the other one was the Elmo. That one is way easier. Like after you've deliberated something enough, like Elmo is basically somebody
just-
calling out.
Yep.
Like enough, let's move on.
Yep.
Well, and I don't know if it was in your email prep for this or if it's actually in this document, but as we get into the council procedures, like this council, we've been very lax in the last 2 years on our discussions, and I think some have gotten a little long-winded. I think if we kind of move forward, we can tighten some of that up with how we structure our meetings and
Yeah.
facilitate discussion.
Mhm.
Well, and that 5-finger, I tell you, Ryan, it's worth its weight in gold. If you can and you're really good at leading meetings. If you can get comfortable in using that tool, it will expedite things and add to the richness of the conversation. It's really slick.
Is there a way that you can like, I just am thinking of the awkwardness of like Ryan looking up and down the dais at people's fingers, like,
It wouldn't actually happen at the dais. It would only happen in workshop, because at the dais, really for us to get comfortable, we
yeah.
have to have a
you
motion in a second.
Yeah.
Right, so then we're getting into debate. It's not, hey, where are you at on like the thought, it's specific to the motion at hand, are you, like, that's black and white, in my opinion, structurally, it's in here. And I think we've had a council that workshop wise, like, we're pretty open.
Mhm.
If we have someone that's quiet that we've had in the past, I definitely see there being value in that. But I
Well,
think
it
we
certainly
both-
would
both
help.
determine-
It certainly will help when you get new members and setting out the expectation that everybody's voice is important. Everybody. And that tool allows everybody's voice to be heard.
Yeah, it's a tool. It's not
Yeah,
something you have to use.
yes,
Yeah.
a Tool in our toolbox. I think depending on the topic, if we know it's gonna be potentially controversial, I think that's a great way of not talking over each other,
Mhm.
engaging where we're at.
And building consensus to, yeah.
Well,
Okay,
and in
so-
that case, consensus in that case is defined as that everybody is at either a love, like, or live with.
Yep.
Okay.
For better.
Which I do like, because I think sometimes it's like, we don't have, like, we try to get a unanimous, it's like, no, we gotta be at a love, like, or live with, and, yeah.
So let's try it now then. Where are you on this?
Love good.
Based off what Stacy said or what?
Don't tell me. Show me.
Show me.
I'll go at 3 because I think that's positive in both.
You mean
the
this?
book
You
and
gotta give it 3. Come on.
3.
Okay, I'm good with 2. And you are?
Wait,
Don't do the book,
Yeah,
do it.
That's why I chose 3. It's in the middle of both.
It means the same thing in both.
3 is the same amount, yeah. I'm 4.
I have an opposite of what you
You're
said,
uncomfortable with
Stacy.
it.
No, I'm good.
No,
4 is good.
4 is bad.
Or is bad in the books.
Four is leery. I just find it easier to remember the alliteration with the L's. Love, like, live, leery, loathe, instead of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
You're loading it. before.
No, I'm a 3.
You're 3. Okay. Jen, with both hands on the wheel, can you give us a finger?
Don't. Poor Jed is like, what is happening in there?
Maybe we'll have to talk to teams to see if they can't get that in there as an emoji so that we can just.
Yeah.
Hey, Jen, can you come pick me up?
Okay, the next document is just council relations open meeting law. That's straight from our council meeting policy that we have already. So that's not new to you. The next one is council violations of statute ordinance policy. I think this is straight from your ordinances. Yeah, and who knows if this is even necessary. But just a statement of, hey, if you violate this, here's what happens. Oh, I think we call that out in our governance process of having that spot.
I'll be honest, I need to spend more time reading through this.
Yeah.
Procedural.
There's a lot in here.
Before.
Depends which spectrum, for which measurement tool.
The next one is your council member roles and responsibilities of just talking through council's authority. Like you've got state statute, then you have city code, then you have council's policies and procedures, and then it moves to administrative, which is on the staff side. And then you've got the QR code to the 412, which is state statute, and then your city code. Next one defines the role of an individual council member. And again, keep in mind that for you guys, this all makes a ton of sense because you've been doing it for how many years? Like the intent is that if you give this guide to somebody who's new, that it helps clarify what their role is. Conflict of interest disclosure, this is straight from your governance process policy. And then we'll get to the appendix. There's a form that goes with this. Council meeting procedures, meeting logistics is straight from your current council meeting policies. Nothing new there. Rules of order, again, that's in the appendix to Ryan's point. That's the technical, we're pretty loose about it, but that is technically how we run a meeting. Remote attendance is just spells out state statute around attending remotely.
And again, that's why I think having this electronically available.
Yeah.
If someone's like, hey, I gotta be remote.
You can pull this up and
What
yeah.
do I do? What do I have to do?
Yep. This next section around monitoring, this was an area that I think at our last workshop session that we talked about, we kind of did already today. And so it clarifies that you're monitoring organizational performance, and then it clarifies that that organizational performance is the city administrative performance. But we had talked about how do we really call out what does that process for performance review look like for the city administrator. And so I looked through a couple other cities' examples of what they do, and they use that annual summary for the performance piece. And then what they also do that I liked was on their council calendar, annually, they schedule, right at the beginning of the year, they schedule a performance and monitoring report summary view closed meeting every December. And it's on the radar, it's on the council calendar, so it doesn't feel like this awkward, piece that the news might pick up on and say, oh, there's a closed meeting for city administrator performance review, because that feels weird. They just put it right at the beginning of the year, it's in their scheduled meetings, and they post for it with their calendar meetings, and then it's there for you. And then they do the summary review for compliance, and then you can, any soft skills that we had talked about that you want to review as a part of that too. So I like that process. I thought that helps clarify that there is going to be a process, and then the posting piece of it.
I like that. Under the performance review and we don't need to dive into it right now, but 3.6, which is the ELs.
Yep.
That's where it talks about performance review process and being tied to the performance of the city.
Yep.
My question on all of that is, have we had legal review that?
We need to do that yet between now and activation.
Because I read that a couple times over the weekend, and to me, it seems like we got you as our only employee who has a employment contract. And it seems like this is somewhat sidestepping the contract, but playing nice with it, and
just make sure.
felt like we're opening ourselves up for a lot of future risk without legal review.
Yep. Okay, got it. And then the other thing that you guys had talked about, and I know that that diagram is like hard to follow because it's tiny on there. This is where having an electronic so you can zoom in, but you talked about spelling out a process for, okay, let's say we get a monitoring report and we don't agree with the interpretation and we want to change. We want to change the, am I saying this right, Stacy? Not necessarily, we don't agree with the interpretation. It is reasonable, but we want to change the executive limitation around it. We want to change a policy because it wasn't the interpretation we were looking for. So it spells out what is that process for your monitoring reports might be ship-shape, looks good, you approve them, or we want to draft a new policy because that interpretation isn't what we were going for.
This process flow is,
Hey, I found it online. I didn't even make it.
okay. Where does it start?
Up on the top.
Oh, there should
Individual-
really be a start button. Yeah.
Yeah, individual members complete their monitoring report evaluation on forms
There needs to be a
provided in the
green, like,
binders.
start, yeah.
Mhm.
That would be good.
Yep.
But it is a really, once you can figure out the arrows and have a starting spot, it does spell out pretty clearly of like, okay, if we have a situation where the monitoring isn't what we were going for and we want to change an EL, how do we go about that? And really make that clear in a really big chart. The next one, page 20, council meeting evaluation, that's that self-assessment form that I already showed you. Individual self-assessments, again, that's that self-assessment form that I already showed you. Council agendas and packets, nothing new here. This matches your governance process on the governance committee helping with that. One new item, and I'll get to the form in the appendix that I want to get your feedback on. We can strike this, or I found it in one of the books that Stacy had me read, was a form for a request for inclusion on council agendas. So if you want an item on a council agenda, how do you request that to the governance committee? We'll get to that form. Right now it's listed in here, but if after you read the form, if you're like, nope, I hate that process, that's terrible, then we strike it. But
I like a structured process, but that form is
intense.
a lot.
Yeah. And maybe it's that we just,
You would interpret that form in a lot of scenarios, actually.
maybe it's that we just need to part it down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like have a process, but the form is
I like
too much
the form process, just
Yeah.
maybe put it in our
language.
language.
Yeah. Council packets and packet review, so that just follows our current process. Agenda, that's the revised agenda. Public hearings, just spells out that process directly from your council meeting procedures already. Public hearing processes. Minutes. Reporting, spells out what we currently do. Community linkage and public input, it talks about the different ways that you link with the community, and then it also talks about the following decisions will require some level of community input, so proposed ordinance changes, master planning, emergency public use of funds, city council communication and linkage with the public. So this is just, how do you handle the public coming to you with items? So we put in there the compliments and concerns section that we have already been using.
Hold on, let's back up.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, under the city council commitment to community linkage and public input.
Yep.
That last bullet, use of emergency public funds. If we declare a state of emergency,
Emergency.
we're not gonna get public input.
No.
In 72 hours to use funds.
Yeah. I gotta edit that. The linkage. Remove, okay. Got it.
And then bullet 2 in that same paragraph, ordinance changes.
Yeah, that should be,
Land, I think those are two different.
yeah, I think the top one's supposed to be proposed ordinance changes,
Yeah.
and the second one is supposed to be sale of public lands. Well,
Yep.
I'll get that changed. Again, council communication linkage with members of the public, that's just our current process of what we do. City administrator delegation and communication, so this is from your delegation quadrant, just explains that a little bit clearer and then also specifies if you're communicating with staff on larger issues, you BCC, or always use BCC with city council and then also CC the city administrator when you're working on staff issues.
Oh, wait, say that again?
BCC city council, so you don't have open meeting law violations. And then if you're working on material staff issues that you would, like if you're talking to a department head, that you'd CC me in your communication.
But the first part, we would never BCC council.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It's any communication from the city administrator to you is BCC. Yep. Good point. And then the next one is working with, the first one's with me and staff, and the next one's with professional services and consultants. So it just spells out that I'm responsible for conducting evaluations of those services and overseeing those contracts but then it also spells out if the process if you have a legal matter and need to communicate with our attorney. Oh. That was the whole procedural guide, Stacy. I know,
Holy
I told you.
schmucks.
It's,
Do you have to go through the appendices?
yeah, I'm gonna go through the appendices. Most of these they've seen before as well, though.
Okay,
The first one is rules of order. You've already adopted those. That's not new. The next one is council decorum, also not new. That you've already approved. The very last tab is the conflict of interest disclosure, which is straight from your governance processes. And you just fill that out annually. That's on your council calendar.
Yeah, council decorum, I thought that was very encompassing of
Yeah, it does a good job.
what we were talking about earlier of
Code of conduct.
code of conduct.
Yeah. The only issue is that it's primarily related to, and significantly more in depth, to city council. It doesn't include your commission members, but they don't have a meeting like you guys do.
Right. Like, I wonder if there's to simplify things, because everything that was in this council decorum, I'm like, spot on. I wonder if we add a just separate page for just volunteer appointed commission member. That can literally be a paragraph of expectation.
In this in the procedural guide.
I don't know where it fits. But I don't know, I read the decorum and I liked everything about it. I feel like that, in my eyes, that hit the level of where we're trying to be to make sure that we're holding everyone accountable.
Like code of conduct is a more global, like outside of the dais. Like decorum is more like how we operate together. Within the confines of a meeting, but like there's conduct as a council member outside of.
Sure.
those two.
Yeah, and the hard thing is that, like, your procedural guide is, well, to your point, I mean, you're kind of saying the same thing. Like, your procedural guide is how you guys all function together collectively as a unit and internally. Your code of conduct is your expectation and accountability to the public.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a different layer. Conflict of interest disclosure, that form you guys have seen before. Let's look at go to the request for inclusion on council agenda. This is the form that Ryan was talking about that is in the appendix, the procedural guide, probably needs to be.
What is it called?
Request for inclusion on council agenda, so it's before the conflict of interest, sorry.
Rules, just before rules of order.
Yeah. This hasn't really, I can think of only one time that I've had this come up in my time here, but inherently, you got a new council member that it could come up that they want an item on an agenda, and how does that process work and happen?
What is the time?
And so this is literally a copy paste from a book and probably could be pared down significantly. I think the overarching of it is trying to walk that council member through whether or not that item belongs on a council agenda, but it's pretty complex.
So just to level set, so we're all on the same page, there's three ways something gets on a council agenda. One is the normal way or consistent way is staff member
Yeah.
puts it on the council agenda. It's reviewed by, today, Tim and I and Anna. Wednesday prior to council packets coming out. I don't think anything ever gets taken off of the agenda at that point, but it's more organizational and some strategy there. Second way would be a council member requesting that something gets added. That request could naturally go to staff, that request could go to myself or to Tim, and it could be included there. The third way is, and probably second most common way would be at the dais. It feels routine every single time, but there's really a purpose there. When we ask for agenda review and adoption, that is an opportunity for any one of the council members and or staff to add an item to the agenda. And at that point, it just simply needs a simple majority to be a motion and a second, and a simple majority to be added to the agenda. And so we've talked about this over the last 5-6 years of different ways, and everyone has kind of different ideas. One was, hey, if there's two council members that support it being added to the agenda prior to the agenda being published, we should just add it to the agenda. I think that opens us up a lot to open meeting law violation, because that one council member is going to be engaging multiple council members to try and find one that will support that being added. And so I do think a form, like a process form like this is good. I think maybe in our common language would be.
Yeah, just part down.
I mean, I think it's good because it's asking you to substantiate the request. It's not just like, hey, I want to talk about.
I almost wonder if it could just be it's the top 5 boxes and a brief statement. And then some of that middle stuff, I think you could take out.
Yeah, I mean, to go exhaustive in that last
Yeah.
question of like, hey, what has council already said in policies that relates to this particular issue? The time in which, in my 6 years that this has come up, it's a recognizable topic that someone wants to talk about.
Yeah.
I don't see something ever coming out of left field with the amount of workshops and engagements that we all have. Like, it's not something that's gonna come out of left field and we're like, oh, okay, I guess we want to talk about that. It's gonna be a pointed topic.
But it does give everybody an equitable means by which to make a request, right? So like, I think about, so a community member comes to you and says, hey, I'm really concerned about blah, 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 X, Y, and Z. And you say something to Anna and say, hey, so-and-so mentioned this, and she's like, yeah, we should definitely talk about that in a workshop or in a meeting. But like a newer member says, hey, I was talking to a community member about X, Y, and Z, and you're like, well, we've talked about that before. Like, there's more room for, I think, being dismissed if you don't have as much experience or history. Do you know what I'm saying? So maybe there's, I don't know.
Again, I'm in favor of having a form and like a process that anyone
I'm like, what?
brand new or long tenure could fill out. I think that also creates a paper trail for them if they desire that.
Yeah.
I think the reality, like your first example is more of how it would go. Of, hey Ryan, I heard from a resident that this is a problem. They're like, we should talk about, let's just make one up, weeds, right? Like noxious weeds or like whatever. And if I'm talking to Anna as part of our every 2-week conversation, and she's like, yeah, that would be great. Like, we actually can bypass all this because her as staff has already then said, yeah, we should talk about it, let's add it to the agenda. And that's usually how that.
That's
would happen.
usually
We've done that. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I want to support that. If we have one council member that wants to talk about a topic, this is a means for them to ask for it to be talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Reality is, if the committee doesn't put it on the agenda,
They can still have it.
they're going to probably bring it up at the dais to ask for it.
Which has
Yeah.
happened.
which has happened, which is 100% within their purview.
Mhm.
And
They just have to be able to get a second.
they have to get a second, and then they have to get 2 additional votes for it to pass.
But
So,
it could open up communication for you too, again.
Awareness of what the need might
When
be.
it's a
or-
new council member and you're like, hey, let me give you some background on this, and then they'd be like, oh, I didn't understand that,
Mhm.
got it,
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
what I would worry about, um, one of the beauties of this form is that it helps the council members stay in their lane by making them look at,
that was, I know where she's going with this. That was where it was found in the section of the book was that it makes them walk through, like, is this an item that should be in the agenda because it's within your purview? Or is it something that should be managed by the city administrator or another staff member? That is the true intent of the form, is like, so that it takes the onus off the governance committee to say, yep, we'll put it on there, or if it's a tough one where you gotta be like, no, we're not bringing that to a council meeting. Hopefully they arrive at that on their own without,
Well, that's actually a really, really valid point, because as you move more into this model, you don't want council members being like, hey, I wanna add an agenda item and I wanna talk about, the speed with which Anna replies to my emails. Or like, I mean, just
Yeah.
like operational things,
Yeah.
right? You don't want that, and
Yeah.
so it forces people to, it's a check, it's a check.
yeah, and maybe it's just that I just need to clean the form up a little, to Ryan's point, it needs to be in like our more easier language to understand. It's literally a copy paste from this book, and so I think I could clean it up to make it a little bit simpler, but I think whether or not people use it, I think it's a good tool, kind of like the Elmo 5-finger, at least we have it, so if it does ever come up, we can lean on it. I don't see very many scenarios where it will, but at least we have it,
Mhm.
is probably.
And I'm sorry, did we have a time and date requirement for this to be
Reviewed by.
reviewed or submitted?
Let me look at the verbiage in the actual procedural guide.
Before we,
Yeah, you need to be able to,
So we had written all that out a year ago, that it had to be submitted.
that's what.
At the time, it was to you and I by X date prior to council meeting.
That was in that original, after we were working with, yeah, I'll go look at that. I know what you're talking about, Ryan. That was in that original draft handbook that we had made.
the other
So if I can
thing
put that timeline with it.
the other thing this form does is tee the council up to potentially
What's coming.
deal more efficiently with the issue. So if it's something like weeds, Ryan, I'm so sorry.
At least you guys have an awareness.
Well, you'd know where it fits in your framework, because the way you direct or guide the organization is through your Ns and ELs. If some of that thinking has already been done through this form, well, the issue is weeds and it fits in possibly executive limitations. What have we already said about weeds and executive limitations? We've said this, but it helps you figure out, one, is this anything we should be touching anyway? Or if we already delegated authority to Anna? And if it is something that we should touch, where does it fit? Is it something about us speaking to ourselves? Is it something about limitations? Where does it fit? So in your effort to slim it down, I'd be careful that you slim it down too much. Because this is set to design, to kind of help you through the process. So
I
food for
agree,
thought as I'm choking.
Agreed with the philosophy or strategy on it. The way I look at this is that we've got the committee that really is gonna be tasked, at least in the first year, but probably well beyond, with becoming the experts in the board governance process. Probably can't expect that all 5 council members are gonna be at that same level. And so I look at it to go, how do I, with 3 other council members that are going to be educated and like aware of it, but maybe not to the level that we would expect that committee to be. Fair or unfair? And so on those three council members, like, how do I make it as easy as possible that if there's a hard topic that they want to talk about as a council, like, how do we make it as easy as possible for them to bring that forward? And I feel like that the burden rests on us from a committee to say, hey, look, here's where we address that topic within EL's other areas. Otherwise, I can see multiple scenarios where it's too burdensome for them to submit the request, and it just festers and it builds and it builds, and at some point we're going to talk about it.
Mhm.
Like, I would rather us go, hey, that would actually be a great one-on-one conversation with you and the administrator to talk through how we're solving that, where we're at. I don't know. Again, this is like so sparingly that I see this even coming up that I don't want to
Right.
over-engineer it.
And usually if it's a topic we're all aware of. I mean, once in a while it comes out of the blue where someone's like, you know, I want a cat park, whatever.
Yeah,
And, okay, yeah, do you introduce it at the end when you have your, you know, little.
that's also an opportunity for council to bring something
Yeah.
forward that they want to talk about. So we're not gonna, there's no opportunity, nor should there be an opportunity to silence a council member.
No, yeah,
It's just how do we,
have provide an avenue. I think
Yeah.
that's really the goal is like, if you're a new council member and you want a topic discussed, how do you discuss it? You know,
Could a version of this be applicable to special presentations too?
oh yeah, for sure.
Because like,
That's a good idea.
great call.
Yeah.
I sometimes wonder why are you presenting to us?
Yeah.
right, and I just, you know, I think squeaky wheels get I mean, not always, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with what's happened, it's just a good way to make sure that everybody's time is being spent on whatever we should be spending our time on.
Yeah, I could spell that out a little bit clearer of like, and I think I can simplify the form, but not oversimplify, but also include, whether it's inclusion on agenda, whether it's a new business, or, you know, no matter where that is on the agenda, if it's a special presentation or if it's but like, it just formalizes a little bit of a process. Again, I don't know that people actually use it or will use it, but I like the idea that the tool is there to lean on if we need to. If you have a council member who is, are you right there pushing back? You getting feeling back in your fingers?
Just basic, keep it. So just keep it.
I thought you were doing the 5 finger.
He's doing his
consent, but-
physical therapy.
Doing PT.
So I can look at that and clean it up a little bit, and I'll look at that draft handbook that we had put timelines to it too. After the appendix for the procedural guide, all that's left in this binder is, and we will replace these with the new ones that get set with our ends, but organizational strategies, and then access to our budget, capital plan, workload analysis, KPIs, and then all of our policies. So most of that's gonna be all electronic, and there's a link for you to get to it from a QR code, but none of that is information you haven't seen before.
QR.
Yeah, she just wants to make sure you, wow, it is big. She wants to make sure you see it.
She wants to make sure you can scan out your classes.
It's more of a maze to me, actually.
He's gonna start connecting.
Then
Okay, Stacy, that was the procedural guide. That was the whole thing. Check that out.
Check.
I knew it wouldn't be that bad
list.
once you started going through it.
Well, so I think we're at a decision point. We've got this article, board leader character and effective governance, with that scenario about the airlines or airfield. That I'd very much like it to have a conversation, kind of build a conversation around it. I'm also aware that we're down in attendance today, and even though Jed, I know you're on the call, it's hard to have this kind of generative conversation this way, and then we're down another member anyway. So what is your thinking, knowing that Stacy won't let you get off the hook without having a conversation sometime about this article, because I think it is so rich in takeaways. Do you want to go through it today, knowing you're kind of short-staffed, if you will? Do you want to build it into the future? Frankly, it's something that I don't need to be facilitating. You've got the questions on the second page of the agenda, or I can be there. So do it today with, those that are at the table. Do it some other time when I'm there. Do it another time without me there. But the bottom line is we're agreeing to use that and have a conversation around that article. What's your preference?
Well, let's reschedule it. It's valuable for all of us to be here. As I was reflecting on it this morning in prep for this, I actually would like to see our five, and feedback here would be awesome, but I'd love to see our 5 council members plus the 3 that are running for council. So 8 of us sit in a room and walk through it. Like, everyone's current perspective is great, but I think also future, like, there's two people that'll be seated, one won't be, but out of 3 people, like, that one person is probably gonna wanna do something else in our community and has risen to the occasion to run. And so I don't know, I've noodled on that a little bit. I certainly want this council to go through it. I would also like the future council, and so that was kind of a mending of the 2 to go, hey, how do we just do it? And so there's also like a 4th caveat to go, hey, do we do it in November? Once we know who the new 2 council members, so we do it in a group of 7 versus a group of 8.
That might be good, yeah. Then you don't have the awkward, like, 3 people that are running against each other, sitting in a room together, that one of them isn't gonna get.
Trying to help.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Like, but by November, we could do the November or December workshop and invite them, which we usually do anyways, to get a kind of flavor for.
Cause there's a lot that we work through as a council, and that's why I think it's important this council goes through and is heard. But it's also important how we carry it into the future.
Yep.
So, yeah,
I like
your perspective of, hey, through the political process, it's probably not great.
What I want to hear from the rest of the folks, though. What are the others thinking?
I guess timing doesn't, I mean, for me, it doesn't matter. We could wait and do it then and discuss it. I think it definitely could be a fun learning process to have it, all of us at the same table discussing and you mentoring or leading the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Jill, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think November after the election makes more sense. You can have their binders ready for them and wrap it and give them a
Oh, that would
present,
be fun.
and they can open it.
I love that idea.
And Jen, what about you? I'm not sure if you're able to hear us all the way through this. Are you able to weigh in?
Yeah, I actually agree that after November, I think it might be a little awkward having 3 people to Anna's point that are running to do it together, because before the election, because you never know how elections go, and whether or not are they going to be in that room?
Yeah.
Let's have an open November about here's where we're going. And so I agree with Jill and Ryan and everybody.
Okay. All right, Anna, then let's table it. Super.
And I think it actually is a really good opportunity for us to kind of even invite them, once we know who the 2 are, to a meeting and, kind of have at least a construct of what that meeting will be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
All right, then Stacy, last thing on our.
Motion.
Woo! Look at
is your,
those
look at all
duns.
those done. I know, it just keeps going. Makes my heart so happy. We're on to the second page of them. So we've made it through the July 24th training. I have some monitoring reports to get to you for ends yet, and then for Carrie's new additional part 2.9. But otherwise, we're, between now and activation, we're ready to go.
Yeah. Yep. Well, keep a steady hand, everyone, as you're working through this 1 foot in each world place, because it's going to be frustrating. It'll be over, but it's going to feel like a long time. And just hang in there. Okay.
Tim's good with a steady hand.
All right.
We'll be busy with budget stuff, so they won't have much time to think about
Excellent.
anything else.
All righty.
Motion
Good to
to
see
adjourn.
everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Stacy.
Stacy.
Thanks, Stacy. See you.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Jed, we're adjourned.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ted. See
See ya.
you.